So that was using, just to finish off, that was using pen and wash. Wash being the water, and then using the differing pens. So moving on, I'm now going to introduce you to using ink. So obviously there's lots of different ink on the market. The one I'm using today it's the one that you used to use in writing pens years ago. It's Parker Quink. I'm using this one because you'll see in my next session we're going to be using bleach with it, and this is a bleachable ink. So when you go and buy your ink, just see if it's bleachable. It's quite good to get a bleachable one. So what we're going to do is, this is ink. It might be a good idea to put an apron on, because if this ink gets on your clothes, it's not going to come out. So this is a blue Quink ink, and we're going to be using this. Just put that to one side there, and I'm going to introduce you back to sort of mark making. Now, I've been out, I'm lucky enough to live by the sea, so I have endless supply of feathers, and I've been in the garden. I've got some sticks, and I've got a sponge here, which I'm going to just cut a little bit off, just to show you some techniques we can use with a sponge. Basically, it's about mark making using different things. So this obviously is an old-fashioned way. It was when people used to write with feathers. So I've got my knife here, and I'm just going to fashion the end of the feather so it gets a bit of a point on it. Okay, now be careful when you're using a knife. Always, when you're using a knife, use it away from you. Never ever do it that way. Okay, so you're basically trying to create a little nib at the end of your feather like that. But you can do it with a stick if you can't get hold of a feather. Tell you another good thing is those skewers you use for barbecues. They're quite good for mark making. Oh, blow my sponge away. So again, this is all about making marks using ink. I'm just going to cut the end of that off so it's a little bit sharper. So I'll start with my feather. So unlike a biro or a fine liner, you've got to continually dip the ink in, because the ink you can only fill so much of this feather up. Okay, and you'll see here that you can get a lot of ink coming out like this. There's quite a big pool of ink there. Equally, you can get a very small, again, I'm pressing very, very lightly, mark making with this feather. A bit of cross hatching here, going to revisit that. The beauty of using liquid ink, I can't emphasize enough, it's so creative, it's so beautiful compared to a manufactured pen. You have a lot more scope, a lot more depth of expressive mark making. Okay, you can even do things like create quite a big blob on your page, and then you can blow it. To do that sort of thing. You've probably got a picture of my head in there, but you can see. So that's with my feather. Same with sticks. Just get some sticks if you can't use a feather from the garden, and again use that. You get these lovely, it makes a nice noise as well, a scratchy noise. Well, we might not like that, but it's quite a squeaky. So you can draw using a feather like this. The sponge is quite a nice way. You if you dip your, I'm going to get the lid here, I'm going to put my sponge in there. Now obviously the sponge is absorbing an awful lot of this ink, so you can sponge areas like this, you get that nice sort of spotty texture, and you can use the sponge to create a shape. You can see I'm revisiting one of my favourite shapes here. Guess what it is? Hopefully you can see that. So I've created that leaf shape again. Then I can go use my feather and go in with some lines to describe it further. It's quite nice. You can bring in your water. There's so much you can do with this technique. Again, blot your brush, get your brush, bring in the water just to soften that edge if that's what you like to do. Beautiful indigo blue this. I mean this ink comes in a lot of colours, and this is writing blue ink, but it comes in black as well. You can see here. Okay, the other thing you could try is, and you can do this with watercolour, you wet the paper first, so you can see here I've saturated that area of paper with water, and now I'm going to put ink onto the dampened area. You get this amazing it's what we call bleeding image. You can create some really interesting shapes, patterns with this. So all I've been using here is a stick, a sponge, a feather, the ink, working on wet paper, working on dry paper, but it's really, really beautiful way of working. So again, have a go and really use your imagination with things that you can use. Go back in with my stick again. You can see the sort of textures you can, looks a bit like fish scales. There we go. That's very fish-like. Revisiting my feather again. I'm actually going to create that little fish. Happy accidents, you see, this is what happens when you start playing around with ink, you get happy accidents happening. There's my little fish. There's my leaf, and that, you can see the difference between that, a beautiful sort of bled water and ink, and then these sort of very fine lines. So it's a really lovely way. So that's using, that is mark making. using ink, sticks, feathers, and sponge.